Imagine sitting in a crowded ballroom, watching your husband accept an award, and instead of thanking you, his wife of 14 years, he thanks his mistress. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily, I'm 42, and I live in Denver, Colorado. For most of my marriage, I believed I had the kind of life many people dreamed about. My husband, Michael, was 45, a successful real estate developer, well respected in our city. People saw him as confident, charming, and generous. To outsiders, we looked like a strong couple who had built a life on trust and loyalty. The truth is, I stood by Michael long before success ever came his way. When we first married, he struggled to keep his business afloat. There were times when bills piled up, when we had to stretch every dollar, and when I wondered how we would make it through another month. Still, I believed in him. I worked extra hours, sacrificed vacations, and put aside my own dreams because I trusted that together, we could build something better. Through those years, I never doubted him. I encouraged him when deals fell apart. I stayed up late while he worked on contracts. I told him he was capable even when he questioned himself. I thought that kind of loyalty meant something. I thought we were unbreakable. But I would soon learn that even the strongest walls can hide cracks, and sometimes the person you love most is the one chiseling away at the foundation when you least expect it. At first, the changes in Michael were so small I didn't want to admit they were even there. He started working later than usual, saying big projects demanded his time. He would leave before breakfast some mornings and return long after dinner. When I asked if everything was all right, he would smile, kiss me on the forehead, and assure me it was only the weight of responsibility. I wanted to believe him, so I did. The business trips began soon after. He used to avoid traveling because he hated being away from home, but suddenly there were conferences, networking events, and out-of-town meetings that seemed too frequent. He never left room for me to join him, always saying it would be boring or too rushed. I stayed behind, convincing myself that this was what success looked like, that it was just another stage in his career. At home, he felt distant, like his body was there, but his mind had traveled somewhere else. He no longer laughed at the same little jokes we used to share. Conversations grew shorter, his attention wandering when I spoke about my day. There were times when he would sit across from me at dinner, scrolling through his phone, and I felt like a stranger had stepped into my husband's chair. My best friend Rachel was the first to say something. She had known me since college and had seen us grow together as a couple. One afternoon, while we were having coffee, she leaned across the table and said, "Emily, I don't mean to worry you, but Michael seems different. Too polished. Like he's putting on a show." She explained she had noticed how carefully he was dressing lately, how he always looked like he was heading to a photo shoot rather than a meeting. I laughed it off at first. I told her he was just trying to maintain a professional image, that appearances mattered in his line of work. Deep down, though, her words stayed with me. I hated the way they echoed later at night, when I lay awake listening to the sound of the garage door closing hours after midnight. The moment that broke through my denial came one Friday evening. I was picking up his suit jacket from the laundry basket when something slipped out of the pocket. It was a white handkerchief, folded neatly, but with a faint red stain smudged along the edge. Lipstick. Not my shade. Not something I had ever worn. I stood frozen, staring at it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When he walked in later, I held it up and asked calmly, "What's this?" He barely blinked before saying it must have been from a client who hugged him after closing a deal. He chuckled as if the question was silly and tossed it aside like it meant nothing. I wanted to scream, but instead, I forced myself to nod. Part of me wanted to believe him, to hold on to the life I thought we had. But another part of me, the part that had been quietly collecting doubts, whispered that this was the first crack I could no longer ignore. The night of the gala felt like one of those moments you never forget. Michael had been nominated for a prestigious award in real estate development, an honor that placed him among the most respected names in the field. I remember slipping into a deep navy gown, one I had saved for a special occasion. I wanted him to feel proud standing next to me, to see me as the partner who had walked beside him through everything. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, every table lined with crystal glasses and polished silver. Men in tuxedos and women in elegant gowns filled the room, their voices blending with the sound of the live band. Michael looked sharp that evening, confident as he mingled with his colleagues. People shook his hand, praised his success, and I stood close by, smiling and nodding, believing this was our moment to celebrate together. When his name was called, the applause was thunderous. I clapped the loudest, my heart swelling with pride. He walked to the stage with his head held high, accepting the award with a broad smile. As he took the microphone, I leaned forward in my seat, expecting to hear him thank his team, his family, and maybe even me. He began with charm, talking about his journey, the challenges of building something from nothing, and the importance of perseverance. Then he paused, his voice softening as he said, "But most importantly, I want to thank my rock, the person who inspires me every day." I braced myself, a smile forming on my lips, waiting to hear my name. Instead, he said, "Vanessa." The sound hit me like glass shattering. For a moment, I thought I misheard. My body went cold, my breath caught in my throat. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy. Guests shifted in their seats, eyes darting toward me as though waiting to see how I would respond. Michael went on, describing Vanessa as someone who had given him vision, who understood him, who believed in him when no one else did. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper. I sat perfectly still, my hands gripping the edge of the table beneath the cloth, nails pressing into my skin. I forced a smile, though my jaw ached from holding it in place. Inside, I was breaking. I could feel the heat of humiliation spread across my face, but I refused to let it show. My eyes stayed fixed on him, pretending I was just another proud wife listening to her husband speak. The applause that followed was weaker this time, uncertain, almost awkward. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. I caught the sympathetic glance of one woman across the table, her lips pressed tight as if she knew the truth. Others avoided looking at me at all. Michael stepped down from the stage, still glowing with pride, unaware or uncaring of the storm he had just set off inside me. I straightened my back, swallowed hard, and greeted him with the same frozen smile. On the outside, I looked calm, but inside, something had shifted forever. When we got home from the gala, the silence in the car followed us into the house. I took off my shoes and placed them neatly by the door, though my hands were trembling. Michael loosened his tie, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. The weight of what I had heard sat on my chest, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I turned to him and asked directly, "Why did you thank Vanessa instead of me?" My voice was steady, though every part of me felt unsteady. He didn't flinch. Instead, he let out a short laugh and said I must have misheard. "You're overthinking it, Emily. Vanessa's been helping with projects, and I wanted to show appreciation. That's all." But I wasn't imagining it. I had seen the way his eyes softened, the way his tone changed when he said her name. It wasn't casual. It wasn't professional. It was tender. It was love. I pressed further, asking why he had never mentioned her as such an important figure before. He sighed, shaking his head, acting as though I was the unreasonable one. "You're reading into things that aren't there. She's a colleague, a partner in design. Don't turn this into something it's not." Gaslighting. That's what it was. He wanted me to question my own memory, my own instincts. But no matter how calm he sounded, I knew better. I had lived beside this man for years. I could read the truth in the smallest shift of his expression, and I knew he wasn't being honest. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Michael slept beside me as though nothing had happened. My mind replayed the speech over and over again. Every detail of the past few months began clicking into place like puzzle pieces. The endless late nights, the frequent trips that never included me, the sudden wardrobe upgrades, the expensive watch he claimed was a gift from a client. I thought about the lipstick-stained handkerchief, how easily he brushed it off. I thought about Rachel's warning, about how polished he had become. I remembered the dinners where his attention drifted, and the times he looked at his phone with a faint smile before quickly locking the screen. The more I replayed it all, the clearer the picture became. Something wasn't just wrong. It was much bigger than I had let myself believe. The betrayal wasn't in my imagination. It was real. It was happening right in front of me, and I had been trying to convince myself otherwise. By the time the first light crept through the blinds, my decision was made. I couldn't rely on his words anymore. If I wanted answers, I would have to find them myself. Quietly, carefully, without letting him know. That morning, I got up before him, made coffee, and pretended everything was normal. Inside, though, I was already planning my next steps. I would stop ignoring the signs. I would look deeper, watch closely, and uncover the truth he thought he had buried. I knew I couldn't dig into Michael's secrets on my own, so I reached out to someone who could help me keep everything quiet. I contacted a discreet attorney, Mr. Lawson, a calm man with sharp eyes who had a reputation for handling delicate matters. I explained enough for him to understand. There were signs my husband was hiding something, and I needed proof before I confronted him. Mr. Lawson listened carefully, then recommended bringing in a private investigator. "If you want the truth, you need evidence," he told me. That same week, he connected me with someone he trusted, a man who specialized in financial digging and discreet surveillance. The waiting was the hardest part. For weeks, I went about my days pretending life was normal, playing the role of the supportive wife, while inside I was restless, almost sick with anticipation. Every time Michael left for another late-night meeting or quick trip out of town, I wondered what new piece of the puzzle was being uncovered. I forced myself to stay patient, to let the professionals do their work. When the results finally came in, the truth was far worse than I imagined. Michael wasn't just having an affair with Vanessa. He had built an entirely separate life with her, funded by money that belonged to both of us. Together, they had siphoned off $8 million from joint investments, money I had contributed to and trusted him to manage. The investigator showed me records, transfers, company documents, all pointing to a shell business registered under Vanessa's name. I sat in Mr. Lawson's office as he laid out the evidence, my hands trembling as I flipped through page after page. There were signatures that looked like mine but weren't, transactions hidden under layers of paperwork, and properties quietly purchased through this so-called company. My chest tightened as I realized the scale of it. $8 million. Not just a fling. Not just betrayal of love. This was betrayal of everything we had built together, everything I had sacrificed to help him rise. For a long moment, I felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The man I had trusted most in the world had stolen from me in the cruelest way, taking both my heart and my future and handing them to another woman. But sitting there, staring at those documents, something inside me shifted. The tears that burned in my eyes never fell. The ache in my chest hardened into resolve. If Michael thought he could lie to me, use me, and strip me of what I had worked so hard for, he was wrong. That day, my heartbreak turned into something colder, sharper. I decided I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, and I wouldn't warn him. I would be careful, steady, and smart. He thought I was blind, but I would show him just how wrong he was. I vowed then and there, I would not be played for a fool. Once I had the truth in my hands, the first thing I did was gather every document I could find. Quietly, carefully, I started collecting copies of bank statements, property records, and contracts that Michael had stored in the home office. Some nights I would wait until he fell asleep, then slip into the study and pull files from drawers, photographing them on my phone before sliding them back exactly as I found them. I even found signatures that were supposed to be mine but weren't, scrawled across forms I had never seen before. Each discovery felt like another wound, but I forced myself to stay calm and focused. Mr. Lawson guided me through every step. He explained which papers mattered most, how to arrange them, and what would hold up in court. Don't tip him off. The more he thinks you're still in the dark, the stronger your case will be when the time comes. His words became my anchor. I wanted nothing more than to scream in Michael's face, but I knew that would only give him time to cover his tracks. So, I kept playing the role of the devoted wife. I smiled when he talked about work, packed his bags when he claimed he had to leave town, and even sat across the table listening to his excuses without letting a single flicker of my real thoughts show. Every fake smile I gave him was another brick in the wall I was building around myself. Meanwhile, Mr. Lawson was preparing two battles at once. On one side, the divorce, ensuring I would walk away with everything I deserved. On the other, legal action that would expose the fraud and make sure Michael and Vanessa were held accountable. It was exhausting work, but every time I looked at the evidence, the anger inside me kept me going. One afternoon, while going through paperwork, I overheard Michael on the phone in his study. His voice carried through the door as he talked excitedly about an upcoming charity gala, one that promised high-profile guests and press coverage. He said it would be a chance to make a statement. The words stayed with me, sharp and arrogant. That was when the idea began to form. If he wanted the spotlight so badly, then that was where I would bring him down. Not in private, not behind closed doors, but in front of the very people who praised him. It wasn't enough for me to know the truth. I wanted everyone else to see the mask ripped off too. That night at dinner, Michael mentioned the event casually, expecting me to play the supportive wife. I nodded, asked what I should wear, and acted as though nothing was out of the ordinary. Inside, though, my decision was already made. The gala would be the perfect stage. He wanted admiration, but what he would get instead was exposure. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control return. The countdown to his downfall had already begun. When I learned about the charity gala, I knew that would be the moment. If Michael wanted the spotlight, then that was where I would make sure the truth finally came out. The first step was making sure I had a voice that night. I reached out to the organization and made a large donation in my own. It was more than I had ever given before, but it guaranteed that I would be recognized and offered time to speak on stage. That stage would no longer belong only to him. With that secured, I started working on the guest list. I invited friends who had known us for years, family who believed in our marriage, and most importantly, Michael's colleagues and business partners. These were the people who admired him most, the ones who saw him as untouchable. I wanted them all in the room when the truth came out, so there would be no way for him to twist it later. Michael didn't suspect a thing. When I told him I had donated, his face lit up. He hugged me, kissed me on the cheek, and said I was wonderful for supporting the cause. He assumed, as always, that I was standing behind him. He had no idea I was standing in front of him this time, ready to block every escape he thought he had. I kept my mask firmly in place. I helped him pick his tuxedo, talked with him about the event, and even teased him about how charming he would have to be when the cameras were on. He smiled, confident as ever, never realizing that each word out of my mouth carried a double meaning. Behind the scenes, Mr. Lawson and I worked tirelessly. I gave him every document I had collected, every proof of forged signatures, every bank transfer. He arranged everything into airtight folders and made sure copies were secured in multiple places. "When this comes out," he told me, "you'll already be protected." His calm, steady approach gave me strength, reminding me that this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. In the days leading up to the gala, I rehearsed my words quietly at night when Michael wasn't around. I wanted them sharp, clear, and impossible to misunderstand. I didn't need to shout or scream. The truth itself would be loud enough. Every sentence I prepared was chosen to cut through the lies he had built and leave no room for denial. As the evening approached, I felt a strange mix of fear and power. My heart raced every time I pictured standing on that stage, but I reminded myself of the $8 million he had stolen, the years of loyalty he had discarded, the public humiliation he had forced me to endure. That memory kept me steady. Michael thought the gala would raise him higher, but I knew better. By the end of that night, he wouldn't be standing tall in admiration. He would be exposed, broken in front of everyone he wanted to impress. And I would finally be free. The gala was everything Michael had promised it would be: grand, glittering, and filled with people eager to praise him. The ballroom shone under golden lights, tables lined with flowers and polished glassware. Laughter and music filled the air, and Michael thrived in it, moving from group to group, shaking hands, telling stories, soaking up admiration. He looked like a man at the peak of his career, completely unaware that the ground beneath him was about to collapse. When the awards portion began, Michael walked to the stage with confidence, his tuxedo sharp, his smile wider than ever. He spoke as though he owned the room, charming the audience with stories of ambition and hard work. Then, just as he had done before, he turned serious and said he wanted to thank the person who gave him strength. Once again, he named Vanessa. The moment he said it, I saw heads turn toward me. A few guests whispered to one another. Others looked away as though they didn't want to witness what was happening. Michael, oblivious, kept speaking, praising her for her vision and support. I sat still, my face calm, though my hands rested firmly on my lap to keep them from shaking. When my name was announced as a guest speaker, I rose gracefully, smoothing my gown, and walked to the stage. Michael stepped back, expecting me to give some sweet, supportive words. I took the microphone, smiled at the crowd, and spoke in a steady, clear voice. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I began, "and I want to thank this charity for giving me the chance to speak. But I have something important to share, not just for myself, but for everyone who has trusted Michael over the years." The room grew quiet, all eyes on me. I nodded toward the projection screen, and with a signal, the first set of documents appeared. "These," I said, pointing at the transfers, "are bank statements. They show millions of dollars moved from joint accounts into a company that does not belong to Michael or me." Another click, and company registration papers appeared, with Vanessa's name in bold. This company, in fact, belongs to the woman he has just thanked on this stage. Gasps broke through the silence. People leaned forward, whispering to one another, scanning the documents on the screen. My voice didn't waver as I continued. "For 2 years, Michael and Vanessa have not only betrayed me as a wife, but stolen $8 million from investments I helped build. This was done behind my back, with forged signatures, and with lies that went deeper than I could have imagined." The crowd erupted in disbelief. Michael's face turned pale, his confident mask gone in an instant. He tried to step forward, to grab the microphone, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Not tonight," I said firmly. Vanessa, seated at a table near the front, pushed back her chair and tried to slip toward the exit. I had already planned for that. With a nod to the security I had arranged, she was stopped before she reached the door. The room buzzed with shock as the reality sank in. Michael stood frozen, his hands clenched, his eyes darting around the room for an escape. But there was none. The truth was out, and everyone had seen it with their own eyes. The morning after the gala, the phone started ringing nonstop. Michael's business partners were furious. Some of them had been at the event and had seen everything with their own eyes. Others had already heard through word of mouth, as news of the scandal spread quickly through the city. By noon, the partners had called an emergency meeting, and Michael wasn't even invited. Within days, contracts were canceled, deals were pulled, and every handshake he had worked years to earn disappeared. Nobody wanted to be associated with him. Vanessa's fall was just as quick. She had built her name in the design world on charm and polished presentations, but after the exposure, her phone went silent. Clients withdrew projects, leaving her without work. Word spread that she was part of the fraud, and her reputation collapsed overnight. The woman who once stood beside Michael, soaking up attention, now avoided stepping outside. I didn't waste any time. That same week, I filed for divorce. Mr. Lawson already had everything prepared: proof of the affair, the stolen money, the forged signatures, and the secret company. Every paper I had gathered in silence became my shield in court. With that evidence, the case was strong. I secured alimony, property, and repayment of the stolen fund. For once, the years of sacrifices I had made were finally acknowledged in a way Michael could never erase. Michael tried to fight back, of course. He accused me of exaggerating, of twisting the truth, but the documents spoke louder than his words. His lies held no weight against the mountain of proof stacked against him. The judge saw through every excuse he tried to make. Piece by piece, the life he had built on deception came apart. As the divorce moved forward, another storm gathered over him. The evidence of stolen funds didn't just matter in court, it also raised legal questions. Authorities opened an investigation into his finances, focusing on the transfers, the shell company, and the properties hidden under Vanessa's name. What had once been a private betrayal turned into a public scandal. Reporters started asking questions, neighbors whispered, and people who once admired him now shook their heads in disappointment. I watched it all unfold with a strange calm. I had cried enough, heard enough, and doubted myself enough. Now, I simply let the truth do the work. I didn't need to shout or argue anymore. Michael had destroyed his own reputation with his choices, and all I had done was bring it to light. By the time the investigation deepened, Michael's name was no longer respected in the industry. Invitations stopped, friendships ended, and the man who once stood so tall was left alone to face the damage he had caused. Vanessa, too, faded into silence, no longer the woman he paraded in front of others. For me, the end of that week marked a turning point. I had walked into battle with fear in my heart, but left with freedom in my hands. The betrayal had taken so much, but it had also given me a strength I didn't know I had. The fallout was his to carry, not mine. In the quiet that followed the storm, I finally had time to breathe. The betrayal had cut me deeper than I ever thought possible. For years, I had trusted Michael with everything: my love, my loyalty, my future, and he had thrown it all away. There were nights when the weight of it pressed on my chest, when I wondered if I would ever feel whole again. But even in the middle of that pain, I knew one thing for certain: I would not let this destroy me. When the divorce was finalized, I had more than just closure. I had the means to build a new life. Part of the settlement gave me financial security, and instead of seeing it only as compensation for what I had lost, I saw it as a chance to create something meaningful. I thought about all the women I knew who had given up careers, opportunities, and personal dreams to support their families, just like I had. Too many of them had no safety net when things fell apart. I wanted to change that. That's how the idea for the foundation was born. I used my settlement to start an organization that offered resources, legal help, and career support to women who had put their lives on hold for their marriages. It became a way to turn my pain into purpose. Every time I sat with another woman who felt trapped or forgotten, I told her she wasn't alone, and I meant it. In helping them, I also healed myself. Looking back, I realized the most powerful moment of my journey wasn't discovering the affair or even exposing the $8 million he had stolen. The most powerful moment was standing on that stage at the gala, with every eye on me, and speaking the truth. For so long, I had been silent, pretending not to see the cracks, carrying the weight of secrets that weren't mine. That night, I took my power back. I stood tall, not as Michael's wife, not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to be silenced. The betrayal will always be a part of my story, but it doesn't define me anymore. What defines me is how I chose to rise from it, how I refused to let it bury me, and how I turned the ashes into something stronger. To anyone listening, I want to leave you with this. Never underestimate a woman who has been betrayed. Heartbreak has a way of breaking you open, but sometimes that break becomes the spark for freedom. It shows you what you're truly capable of, and it pushes you to places you never thought you could reach. My marriage ended, but my life did not. In fact, it began again. And this time, it is mine alone, built not on someone else's lies, but on my own strength, my own choices, and my own voice.